And then the State Department did a very good job in enforcing those resolutions, which has always been the problem. Countries vote yes, but then they don't do it. Why? Because there's a lot of money involved.
What did you make of the news earlier in the week that there's all these secret nuclear testing facilities spread around the country? I think it was 13 of them. To your mind, is that like, that's old hat? We all knew that,
well, no,
or was that?
It's not old hat, but I agree with what the president said, and I take him at face value. It's something that our intelligence services have known. And from my sources is that most of those sites were actually short-range ballistic missile sites that they would likely use on South Korea in terms of a conventional war as opposed to a nuclear war.
But do you think they had been lying to, you know, in the intelligence community? Do you think the North Koreans had been lying to us about those sites? Do you think we knew?
Oh, North Koreans will look us in the face and lie every day. They're no different than the Russians and the Chinese communists. They're all very good at that. Just the way you and I are looking at each other,
right,
and we're communicating, they just lie and they lie again.
So the American public was maybe shocked and surprised, but you don't think the Trump administration was?
No, not whatsoever. I mean, we have a good feel for their nuclear weapon inventory size and also some location.
General Keane, sorry to interrupt you there. Here's President Trump. He is deplaning from Air Force One. He's at Beale Air Force Base in California. He's there to survey fire damage from the raging wildfires. So far, they've killed 75 people, Leland.
Who he's with there, you can see Andrew McCarthy, now the incoming House Minority Leader, currently the House Majority Leader there, both the governor of California and the governor-elect of California. Here he's going to be visiting the town of Paradise, California, which, in the words of Kevin Corke, our White House correspondent who is there, it is basically a moonscape, in his words, that there is quite simply nothing left. It has been burned fully to the ground. That is what they call the campfire there, which has now been contained by about 50% or so. That is the northern fire just north of Sacramento. We saw on the tarmac there, as Air Force One pulled up, the helicopters, both the Black Hawk helicopters and the Ospreys that will take the president and the press pool on a tour. So you understand what's happening here as the president has walked off the plane. There is a press pool traveling with him as well, and we're going to wait and see if the president comes over and makes any remarks to the press as this begins. He had talked to them earlier as he departed. It doesn't look like the president's heading over there. So right now he is headed towards the helicopters for his trip to survey the damage. Countless homes destroyed in these fires. And Jillian, as you pointed out, not only more than 70 people killed, but there are still hundreds of people unaccounted for, as now there are teams going house to house to house. And this is one of the things the president is going to see, searching for people who were not able to make it out. In some cases, there was one way in, one way out, and people just couldn't make it.
If you talk, Leland, to the firefighters and first responders on the ground in these types of situations where they face the aftermath of natural disasters, or I don't know if you can actually call this the aftermath, they're still blazing, but this is now part of the hardest task, going and finding people, finding the remains of families and figuring out who is what, figuring out which of those more than 1,000 people missing might eventually enjoy, you know, being reunited with their families and which have passed away. It's a tough, arduous, grueling task ahead of them now. So it's the next 24 hours is going to be painful for folks on every side. Hopefully President Trump being there will give them, you know, a morale boost.
Now, well, we know the president's going to meet with a number of the first responders and thank them for their efforts. This is the helicopter that the president will then get in. He got in there with not only the governor of California, the governor-elect of California as well, and then they will head off for their stops to survey the damage. The other part of this, Jillian, for the first responders who are dealing with this, is that fire season continues. We heard from Adam Klotz that the winds are going to pick up through this weekend. Rain is still a few days off. So you have firefighters that are exhausted, that have been working sort of endless shifts in hot, brutal conditions, trying to contain these fires, then with the possibilities of more fires to come, something the president will hear about. And there's a saying that Kevin Corke has, which is that there are times the commander-in-chief becomes the comforter-in-chief, a role that undoubtedly he will play as he meets so many of the people affected here, Jillian.
All right, we're going to stay with the president. We'll check back in once he lands in Paradise on the helicopter there. Meantime, I want to thank my guest, General Keane. Thanks for sticking around with us, sir. We will talk to you soon. Kevin Corke is live with more on the president's trip. He's out of Paradise. Kevin, what can you tell us?
Great job in your coverage, folks. And obviously, as we learn more about the president when he is obviously on the ground, we'll share that with you and all our viewers across the Fox News channel. Let me just say this. Say what you will about the president. He is consistent in his approach to such disasters. That is to say, the full weight of the federal assistance is always at the ready, and in fact, it's distributed as quickly as possible. In fact, as I take you to Twitter, let me just share a bit of what the president had to say before making his way here to the Golden State. He said on Twitter, "Thank you to Governor Jerry Brown. Look forward to joining you and Gavin Newsom in California. We are with you," obviously speaking on behalf of all of the American people. As you pointed out, the president on the ground here in the Golden State, clearly he gave the reporters there at the White House before deplaning and before making his way up here to California a bit of a preview, and I want to just share part of what he had to say because I think you'll find it instructive as we look forward to what he hopes to do while he's here on the ground.
So we're going to California. We're making 2 stops. We're going to the 2 areas that you know very well, and it's a shame. It seems that many more people are missing than anyone thought even possible. And I want to be with the firefighters and the FEMA and first responders. We'll be spending a lot of time. We'll be coming back here, probably landing at 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But we want to spend a lot of time.
I want you to hang on to the last thing you heard him say there. We want to spend a lot of time. That's really what's behind this opportunity for the president. You've seen the pictures. They've been devastating. You heard Leland mention dozens dead, hundreds more, if not perhaps even as many as 1,000 at last check, still missing because of the fires here. This is a recurring problem, and I just want to share a little factoid to give the people at home a sense of how often this has been a problem and besetting, quite frankly, not just the Golden State, but the American taxpayer. In fact, since 2005, California has received some $6 billion in FEMA grants to fight and then obviously rebuild from the numerous wildfires. And you may be saying, well, how many, Kevin? Well, since 2000, California's had 198 federal disaster declarations. That's the most of any state in the country. And almost all of them, 177 out of 198 federal disaster declarations, involved fires. Now, one of the main arguments that the Trump administration is trying to make is we collectively, the federal and state governments, can do a better job of mitigating these fires before they happen. And maybe that would not only reduce the number of disaster declarations, it would save lives. That's a conversation that the president expects to have both with Gavin Newsom, the incoming governor, Jerry Brown, the outgoing governor, and a number of first responders and those who are here on the ground doing the heavy lifting as this community tries to recover. Jillian, Leland?
Kevin, with all the criticism President Trump is receiving, I think now that we've seen the toll in this fire, 75 dead, over 1,000 missing, it's a conversation well worth having. Thanks, Kevin. Leland?
All right, we keep watching Marine One as it gets ready to take off from Beale Air Force Base. You can see a number of the other helicopters that travel with the president now taxiing off. Also traveling with the president, a pool in one of the V-22 Ospreys. They're going to be there as the president greets everybody, and that's sort of where we'll end up getting the pictures of him talking to not only first responders, but also talking to those who have lost homes, who are still searching for relatives. And as the president pointed out, it's going to be a long day. He's going to spend a lot of time in Northern California there. That's where the campfire is. That's where Paradise, California is. That, as so many have said, has been leveled in a way that there's not much recognizable left. The other place he is going to visit come this afternoon, California time, is down near Los Angeles. The Woolsey fire that destroyed so much of Southern California, Malibu that we all know that is along the Pacific Ocean. And in some cases, the fire went all the way down to the beach. Jonathan Hunt is there as some folks have been allowed to return to their homes, or perhaps what was their homes. Jonathan?
Leland, good afternoon to you. This is a moonscape as well, as Kevin was talking about up in paradise. It is extraordinary when you look around here. And just talking about the politics of a presidential visit, I can tell you that the people who are coming back to find that this is all that's left of their home don't give one whit right now about politics. They don't care whether this was caused by climate change. They don't care whether this was caused by poor land management. All they care about is getting their lives back together. And as you can see quite plainly here, that is going to be a very tough task for hundreds of families here in Malibu and the other areas north and west of LA that got hit by the Woolsey fire. They come back and they find this. Absolutely nothing salvageable whatsoever. And as you look over there to the horizon beyond us, those are the Santa Monica Mountains over there. Those are the mountains over which the flames came, and they rushed down there so quickly, so fast, that very few people here in Malibu had any time to grab anything except the barest of essentials. So they didn't have time to gather photo albums, all those things, all those memories that people like to keep hold of. There just wasn't time. Now, when are they going to be able to get back in here? Well, that's a question I have friends who live here are asking every day, if not several times a day right now. And the answer is not good, Leland. We're being told that it could take some time, days, even weeks, simply because it's so dangerous. And right now, there's no power in any of these areas. Listen here to a spokesman from SoCal Edison.
We have no estimates right now for full restoration, but we're going to stay at this for the days forward and probably well into a few more weeks of actually work.
And these are all people who loved their homes. And I know the people along this street, Leland, because a decade ago, this is the very street that I lived on. These are ordinary, hard-working Americans. These aren't the Malibu millionaires you hear about so often. They're nice homes, but they're homes that people have worked for years and years to build up. You can imagine the family sitting out here, their outdoor grilling area with that view of the Santa Monica Mountains. The reality is they may never be able to do that again. And that is a story that is going to be similar for hundreds of families in this area, Leland. It is devastating what so many people are having to go through right now. Leland?
Now, you make a very good point in terms of what people care about at a time like this. Jonathan Hunt, Malibu, California, with some of the stories undoubtedly the president will hear as he heads to Southern California. Jonathan, thanks so much. We'll keep watching the president for his movements a little bit north of you.
Election workers across Florida examining thousands of contested ballots by hand now before tomorrow's deadline. Peter Ducey's live in Broward County, Florida, with the latest on that manual count. Peter?
Jillian, the hand recount in the Senate race here helped the Democratic incumbent Senator Bill Nelson narrow the gap with Republican Governor Rick Scott by 274 votes. That is tens of thousands of ballots fewer than Nelson's lawyer, Mark Elias, had been saying would help them here in Broward County. So now Nelson's lawyers are inside trying to figure out why the recount total is off by 2,000.
The ballots are in the building. The ballots are in the building. Somebody must have put their stack in a tray where it didn't belong, and we didn't pick that up. What we can do is go back and recount. I believe the shortage looks like it's in early voting. We can go back and recount that. The ballots are in this building. There would be nowhere else for them to be, but they are misfiled.
But there are two reasons the 2,000 missing ballots aren't going to make a difference. One, they wouldn't put Nelson ahead even if he got all of them. And two, the machine recount results were submitted 2 minutes late and rejected. So the original Election Day count is the one that stands. And of course, that was before anybody realized there were thousands of ballots missing. The Nelson campaign was also just set back by a federal judge because they wanted the state to bend the rules and count ballots that weren't received in the mail by 7 p.m. on Election Day. And the court decided not to make an exception to the election law. That impacted thousands of ballots, which means it's thousands that can't ever possibly wind up in Nelson's column. Governor Rick Scott, who claimed victory in this Senate race that still has not been certified, is now accusing Nelson's lawyers of just trying to play this out in court so that they might be able to alter election law in Florida ahead of the 2020 presidential contest. Jillian?
Not reassuring at all. Peter Doocy, thanks for that reporting. Leland?
All right, with that, to try to make sense of this, if you can, we bring in Florida Talk Radio host Brian Mudd from just a little bit north of Peter in Palm Beach County. What is it about you guys in Florida and elections, man? It just seems to go from like the sublime of hanging chads to now the ridiculous of 2,000 ballots missing.
Yeah, some of us still have PTSD from 2000, and I'll tell you, Leland, that it's really not a Florida problem. It very much is a Broward and a Palm Beach County problem, and there are very specific reasons why we are in this mess. And the single first reason is that we have a bunch of laws, new laws that came into place in 2001 after Florida 2000, and they simply have not been followed by the supervisors of elections in Palm Beach and Broward counties.
That brings up an important point, though. The supervisors of elections do report to the governor. If Rick Scott had wanted to throw Brenda Snipes, the woman who was just there trying to explain what happened to 2,000 ballots in a locked room, he could have done something about it. Does he have any responsibility, or Republicans in general?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. There has been a big discussion stateside about that for years now. Brenda has been running afoul of some of the guidelines in the state for going all the way back to election cycles in 2012, even in local elections. And Rick could have done something about it. He chose not to. So ultimately, he is kind of getting bitten by his own situation here.
You agree,
but yes, you're absolutely
You think
correct.
that's a fair criticism?
I do think it's a fair criticism, and, there are plenty of Republicans that are willing to make it. Ultimately, Rick Scott's going to come out of this recount just fine, but there's a lesson to be learned here, and I think the single first lesson is that we have laws, and if we don't abide by them, and we haven't since 7/31 in Palm Beach or Broward counties election night, you're going to have consequences, and we see the consequences.
All right, as Peter Doocy reported, it appears as though there is an insurmountable lead by Rick Scott over Senator Nelson. This was Chuck Schumer on Wednesday talking about Bill Nelson. Take a listen.
Bill Nelson is strong as could be. He believes, I believe, he's won a majority of the votes. And as long as they're counted, he will continue being senator from Florida.
Does that make any sense to you?
Altered sense of reality. Yeah, no, that's an altered sense of reality. And the first thing is, when you take a look at actual recounts anyway, the average statewide recount since 2000, the number of votes to change, is 282. And the most in the history of the United States is 1,247 in Florida 2000.
Brian, I get you're as dialed in as anybody gets in Florida. What is Rick Nelson and Andrew Gillum's end game here? Reasonable people could agree neither of them are going to win this race. They're behind by too many, as you point out. What do they want out of this?
Ultimately, you're seeing in the case of Bill Nelson, someone who spent his entire life in politics, and he's retired at the end of this election. This is it. So I figure he's got nothing to lose. In the case of Andrew Gillum, that's a situation where he actually went ahead on election night and gave it up before the Florida Democratic Party said, hey, hang on, we know how to do some things in South Florida, so just hang tight.
All right. We know how to do things. All right, back to Bill Nelson, though. There's a graceful way to leave. There's a non-graceful way to leave. Recount after recount and lawsuit after lawsuit, nobody classifies as graceful. Is that because graceful doesn't matter anymore, or are there Democratic forces from Washington, a la Chuck Schumer, saying to his buddy Bill Nelson, hey, even if you press the issue longer, here's why and here's what's in it for you?
I guess. I certainly can't speak to Chuck Schumer, but I certainly do know Bill Nelson quite well. And ultimately, what they saw was an overvote and an undervote in the tens of thousands in Broward in particular. And they saw that as a window of opportunity. And obviously, it was one that was not based in reality. And they have doubled down on this so many times that it's almost like they're going to see it through to the end no matter where that leads. But the most important thing that comes out of all this is accountability for the supervisors of elections at the end of this entire process. So we never are in this situation again.
And conceivably that will be up to the new governor in Florida, conceivably, or at least he calls himself Governor-elect DeSantis. We'll see if it gets certified. Peter Doocy saying it could happen as soon as Tuesday if the courts don't get involved again. Brian, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Leland. Always good to be with you. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Coming up, President Trump says he's answered written questions from special counsel.
You need. Plus, enjoy enhanced coverage throughout your home with X5 Pods. Click, call, or visit a store today.
Welcome back. This Saturday, the migrant caravan is at the border, at least part of it, and now thousands of would-be immigrants are trying to figure out how to get into the United States. On the other side of the border, the U.S. military that has ramped up their presence on President Trump's orders and preparing for their arrival. William Lajeunesse live from Tijuana, Mexico. Hi, William.
Well, Leland, a lot depends on how long this lasts, right? It's one thing if Tijuana is a stepping stone. It's another thing if this goes on for a long time. For instance, the governor now is saying the caravan could be here from 6 to 18 months. And that means you have to feed everybody. So this is a food line. They're getting basically bread and some pasta, as well as some beans, and some people eating over here. Right now, we're saying there are about 2,600 of the caravan migrants here. The government is expecting another 3,200. Some are in for the long haul. They're realizing that reality is setting in, right? So they arrived here with certain blind faith that generations before them had simply entered the U.S., asked for asylum, got released, and then went to live with family. Well, that is no longer the case. President Trump, watching some of this video, is disturbed, right? He's saying, why are caravan migrants carrying a Honduran flag, a country that they disowned and left?
If they have such fear and such problems and they hate their country, why do we see all the flags being waved? For Guatemala, for Honduras, for El Salvador, we're seeing flags all over the place. Why are they waving flags? This has nothing to do with asylum. This has to do with getting into our country illegally.
So I caught up with one of those guys who carries the Honduran flag, who got called out by the president. He said, listen, I'm carrying the flag not to represent the government of Honduras, which he considers a corrupt gang of thieves, but the people of Honduras.
Tenemos nuestra familia. It's because where he had his family, where he borns, and he's representing his country.
So, Leland, the big takeaway I have after covering this for 5 weeks, I think, people don't have a lot of information. They are kind of an information bubble. Obviously, when they were walking, they didn't get very much, but they really don't know what to do. They didn't know that there was a change in the asylum law. The executive order, the president said you can't just step in and basically get released, catch and release is over. They didn't know about that. One said to me this morning, I'm going to go up to the border and tell them about my plight. I go, you're not going to get in to see a border agent, right? Or someone in asylum. The wait is 5 weeks long if you even arrive today. So there's a lot of information these people simply don't know. That's too bad, but there could mean they're going to be here a long time. Leland?
As you point out, William, just at the beginning of this situation and of your great reporting on it, excellent work. You'll be in Tijuana a lot more this fall and winter. Appreciate it, my friend.
You bet.
For more insight on the situation at the border unfolding now, I want to bring in Texas Republican Congressman Michael Burgess. Congressman, thanks for joining us on a Saturday. You saw those live pictures out of Tijuana just now, along with all of us. Those people don't look like a national security threat to me. Those people look like people who have traveled a long way. They're tired, they're probably hungry, and they're scared.
Well, first off, Jillian, thanks for having me on this afternoon. I appreciate it. I will tell you, after several years of traveling to at least the Texas border and going into the shelters that we provide for unaccompanied minors coming to this country, having traveled to Central America myself, I get it that there are people who do leave for economic reasons, but the statement that was made in the lead-in to this, the rhetoric that is used in the United States Congress, the rhetoric that in the previous administration came out of the White House, was one that implied that if you could get here, you would get a permiso, you would get a slip of paper that told you could come in the country and stay. And that is really what has been so injurious. Think of the difficulty that those people encountered on their trek up here. But in fact, it's a saleable commodity from coyotes and human traffickers in those countries to sell people a ticket or a charge that they can come to the United States, and it's expensive. It is an expensive, dangerous journey for them. So I think it's important to get the word back that it is no longer business as was usual. You are going to have to comply with our asylum laws, and the fact of the matter is it's not a free ticket in.
Look, complying with asylum laws is one thing. That's, you know, a priority for the administration. But critics of the president will say, why create an environment that's inhospitable to refugees and asylum seekers? This is a strong point for America. It's always been thus. Why do we have to change that?
Well, I don't think that is the choice at all. Actually, the difficulty will be on the southern side of the United States border in Mexico. But look, the United States of America takes in more people legally every year than every other country on the face of the earth combined. And it has been that way for several years. I don't have the figures for 2017, the first year of the full year of the Trump administration, but I believe that number will be even a little bit higher. So it's not that we're not welcoming to immigrants, but the other side of this is in 2012, when President Obama unilaterally said, I'm going to change by executive order the immigration laws of this country, the word went back that, hey, if you can get up there and get one of these notice to appear, again, called a permiso, then you're going to be in the country and you've got nothing to worry about. And look at the dollars when unaccompanied minors come into this country. They become then the charge of the Department of Health and Human Services.
All right, well, Congressman, if the administration is planning to welcome people at lawful points of entry, why has the president sent thousands of troops to the southern border? Why are they spread out along all entry points of the border for hundreds of miles?
Because of the onslaught of people that were just being unloaded on this country and unloaded on our social welfare systems. Children that are going to have to be placed in schools, children whose vaccination status is not known. And this has been going on for several years.
So you're comfortable with the idea that, as critics of the president say, he has now militarized the southern border. This is fine to you?
Well, of course, it's not the first time in U.S. history that's happened. But look, here's what I think is more important. The governments of those countries, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, the governments of those countries, no one forced those people to run for president of those countries, but they have the obligation to take care of their people. And we are spending a ton of United States tax dollars on taking care of their children who arrive in this country. I think we should deduct that figure from foreign aid that goes back to those countries, make it about their money, and that will make it important to those leaders. They need to be stepping up and doing a better job, not encouraging these caravans to leave.
All right, Congressman, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for infusing this conversation with some reasonable, level-headed talk. We appreciate it. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you.
Leland.
All right, President Trump in California, getting off Air Force One. You can see there a few minutes ago. He is on board Marine One. We'll check in when he lands at his first location. And with the midterms over, the Democratic Party is already looking ahead to 2020. 2016 didn't work out so well with them. One person who thinks he could be a 2020 prospect, Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado. Governor, good to see you. Back with you in a minute.
President Trump says he's answered questions from special counsel Robert Mueller himself, and he's expected to turn over those written answers in the coming days. This development comes amid widespread criticism over his appointment of Matthew Whitaker as the acting attorney general in place of Jeff Sessions. Now, Ellison Barber joins us live from studio. Welcome with the latest, Ellison.
Hey, Joanne. Yeah, so President Trump told reporters that he personally answered about 140 questions. He said he answered 142. Some, he said, were questions, a few big questions that they thought they were going to get and didn't necessarily get. He says that they will be submitting those answers this coming week.
It's a lot of the things we asked for. There's some things, there are 4 or 5 big things left off. I think we'll probably get them too. But it's, as you know, it's a very complete list. I think it's 142 items. And that's a lot of items. It didn't take very long to do them, and they were my answers. I don't need lawyers to do that. Now, you need lawyers for submittal.
President Trump says he answered the questions easily, but also talked about his concerns over a perjury trap. The special counsel's investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election has resulted in indictments of at least 30 people and 3 Russian entities. 4 former Trump campaign aides pled guilty to charges related to the special counsel's investigation. The president has repeatedly criticized special counsel Robert Mueller and the investigation into ties between his campaign and Russia. On Twitter this week, he called Mueller's team a disgrace to our nation and said they refuse to look at bad acts and crimes on the other side. That not pleasing a whole lot of Democrats.
For what seemed like the millionth time, the president angrily, wildly, and baselessly ranted about the special counsel's investigation. It doesn't matter to him that his claims have no basis.
House Democrats demand once again that in our negotiations on the omnibus bill, that the GOP leadership join us, including language that would say the special counsel to protect any special counsel.
Trump forced out Attorney General Jeff Sessions and named Matt Whitaker acting Attorney General. Democrats say Whitaker is problematic because he's criticized the special counsel in the past, publicly criticized it. There are also questions about the legality of his appointment. Some congressional Republicans, like Texas Senator John Cornyn, are urging the White House to quickly submit an Attorney General nominee to try and eliminate some of those concerns. Jillian?
Ellison, thanks for that reporting. You always cut through the crap and bring us the stuff that matters. Leland?
Florida. Full recount underway. Hand recount, that is. The deadline tomorrow. What to expect as the clock winds down. And Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has announced her bid for House Speaker this week. But there's a big question about how much support she can garner from her colleagues. Will President Trump help her out?
I have overwhelming support in my caucus to be Speaker of the House.
Well, the midterms aren't technically over. We're still waiting on Florida and a couple of House races, but 2020 is already starting. Among those Democrats who have headed to Iowa and New Hampshire, outgoing Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, who is with us now. I know it's not official, sir, but do the midterm results make it more or less likely you're going to throw your hat in the ring?
I don't think they had that big an impact, although it was interesting to see how many of the successful Democratic candidates across the country really managed to bring in different backgrounds. They weren't the traditional politicians. They came from the military, they came from business, they came from all walks of life.
Well, as I was telling Jillian Turner in the break, you and I knew each other when you were a brew pub owner. Talk about coming from a retired geologist turned brew pub owner. It brings up an important point, though. You look at the list of potential Democratic candidates, and you kind of have 2 camps, if you will. You've got the progressives, and shall we say you've got either the moderates or the more practical among the Democratic presidential hopefuls. And you're fairly squarely in the latter group of that, who's willing to work pretty much across party lines. Does that make it harder for you in a potential primary?
I don't think so. I mean, there's certainly schools of thought that say that creates a barrier, and unless you're, right out on the edge of every political debate, you won't get traction in a national primary. I'm not sure that's true. I think there might be almost like a new silent majority of people that really do want to get things done. Once the election's over, we've got to roll up our sleeves and, what are the places where we can find common self-interest, common ground, and compromise, and move our cities, our states, our country forward.
Presidential candidates are always asked to answer for the most polarizing among them in their parties. Nancy Pelosi, if she becomes Speaker, does it make it harder for Democrats like yourself potentially running for president? They're going to have to answer for somebody whose unfavorables are worse than the president's.
Well, but I think you look at Speaker Pelosi, and she did go out and she recruited personally a number of the candidates that were successful in the midterms.
Yeah, and a lot,
she raised a
of
ton
the
of money
candidates, but Governor, a lot of the candidates that were most successful in the midterms, it's flipping swing districts that you'd need if you're running for president, won by saying, I'm not voting for Nancy Pelosi.
Some did. There was some of that. But I don't think she's as extreme as people say she is. Certainly, at some point there's going to have to be that transition. I know she's working through. What is that transition of power? What does that look like in the House?
Well, you know, the president is fond of coming up with nicknames for some of his opponents. If we look back at that list of the 20 or so Democrats, there's a few of them who already have nicknames. Have you thought or perhaps worried about what possibly yours might be?
Well, you know, I had a childhood where I experienced many of those nicknames already. I mean, Poop and Scooper, Chicken Cooper. I don't think he's going to come up with a name that I haven't already heard.
Haven't heard, or is more insulting. That's pretty good.
Exactly, more insulting. Exactly.
All right, we got about 60 seconds left. Give you a little bit of an easy one on this. What is missing from the conversation right now that you're going to add? The Iowa caucus is February 3rd, 2020. So basically 13 months. The debates, though, between the potential Democrats could start as early as mid-spring. What's missing from the conversation you're going to bring?
Well, I think there's got to be a deeper dive into, you know, jobs and how we do the training for that. I know it's not politically popular. It doesn't poll high on the list of things.
How do you run on a jobs platform when we're experiencing the lowest unemployment we've had in the country in decades? Your state of Colorado's exploded.
Right? We've been the #1 economy in the country for the last 2 years, according to U.S. News and World Report and USA Today. But that's not the point. We know that we're going to have a recession, right? Anybody who doesn't believe that is kidding themselves. So I think we've got to be looking at what are the long-term investments do we make sure, A, that it continues, and B, how do we get everyone to participate in this expanding economy? How do we make sure that we're expanding the middle class as well?
All right, probably some of the lessons you're going to be talking to for the folks, the incoming class of governors you're going to be talking to in a little while in Colorado Springs. Good to see you, sir, as always.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. Jillian?
Still ahead, the Navy's latest warship is getting ready to hit.
All right, the Navy welcomed its newest warship. Here it is, the commissioning ceremony at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. 75, that's all it takes. Sailors will set sail on the USS Sioux City tomorrow as it heads to its home port in Florida. Bon voyage.
And the clock is ticking for that hand recount in Florida as the deadline of tomorrow grows ever closely. This hotly contested race, the two races there for governor and Senate, have everybody on their toes. Here to discuss with me is Kevin Walling. He's the vice president of Hamburger Gibson Creative, and Alex Vogel, CEO of the Vogel Group. Gentlemen, happy Saturday. Thanks so much for joining me. The president tweeted out earlier this morning, I want to get this tweet up on the screen if we've got it. He said, I can get Nancy Pelosi as many votes as she wants in order for her to be Speaker of the House. She deserves this victory. She has earned it, but there are those in her party who are trying to take it away. She will win. Alex, I want to go to you first. What is happening?
So first of all, I'll say I think Nancy Pelosi will ultimately be the Speaker. I don't think she'll need the president's help or votes to get there. But the challenge is she has a huge, vibrant class of new people with a lot of demographic and partisan and age splits, generational splits, and there's going to be a lot of pressure. The question is how she navigates that pressure to let some of those folks feel that they're empowered and participate, and how she balances that, frankly, with exercising her authority as Speaker to punish some of these folks who have come out and said they're not going to support her.
But Alex, when you say that, aren't you kind of just saying it in a sneaky way, meaning you and possibly even President Trump are just saying this because you want to sow division, further division in the Democratic Party?
No, look, to be honest, I think the less divisive path for the Democrats is to have Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. If they blew that up right now, after, frankly, she just, from their perspective, won the Super Bowl, I think that creates a lot of chaos. So I think from the Democrats' perspective, that's a much smoother outcome.
Kevin, what do you think? Should she be in or out?
Yeah, Jillian, I can agree with Alex more on this issue. You know, as David Cicilline said earlier to Leland on the program, you don't dump your star quarterback after winning the Super Bowl. She presided over the biggest Democratic victory since Watergate this past cycle. As Alex said, we're a big family. We're a big tent. Over 60% of our Democratic caucus is either women, LGBT people, or people of color. She's going to preside over the most diverse Democratic caucus in the history of the country. And at the end of the day, she's going to get the votes on the floor.
But what about making, you know, space and room for the next generation, for new energy, new blood in the party? What about all of that? that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jillian. You know, we had Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, Latino member from New Mexico, who ran our DCCC this cycle, the most successful in a generation. You have David Cicilline, who was on the program earlier, openly gay member from Rhode Island, who heads up one of our policy committees. In the Congress that's set to take over, half of our chairmen are people of color. So again, we have the most diverse caucus in the history of the country. I think this Speaker Pelosi is going to find ways to elevate younger members, as we're seeing it already play out since last Tuesday.
Only a few seconds left. Alex, what do you say about this? I mean, on your side, right? How are you preparing to go back into the new session, 116th Congress, but be in the minority?
That's just a reality that a lot of these members, frankly, haven't faced, and they're going to have to get used to. Fortunately, we did not have a lot of leadership strife on the Republican side, and I think Leader McCarthy and that team are ready to roll.
They're ready to roll, but are they feeling a little down in the dumps about the election?
Look, you never like to lose elections, and even worse, to lose majorities, but I think they're prepared to go ahead and try and advance their agenda.
Alex Vogel, Kevin Walling, thanks so much for your time this weekend.
Jillian.
We will check back in with you guys in a few weeks. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having
Jillian.
us.
All right, 1:56 here on the East Coast, 10:56 in California. Live pictures from Chico Municipal Airport as Marine One has touched down there for